The 1991 release Vice Project Doom is an extremely cheesy side-scrolling action game that has some driving and shooting levels peppered into it. Just look at this box art. I'd hang this on my wall. So I like this pick because its production value is super high across the board. Like, a lot of cool stuff is in the backgrounds, like this first level which has this water reflection effect that accounts for taller buildings where sprites casually go in front of the water, or this fiery haze thing going on during this boss battle. Just generally, the visual design here is great. You can tell what everything is in the backgrounds and the sprite work is solid. We also have Ninja Gaiden-esque cutscenes, though they're way more detailed in this than they were in that, and Vice Project Doom is considered to be a bit of a ripoff of Ninja Gaiden, but that's not a bad thing. I enjoyed this game more than I expected. It's a fun side-scroller that controls well and has a silly, sort of endearing style. It's definitely worth checking out, and it looks great. Often NES ports of bigger games will barely resemble the game they're based on. Like, they'll be stripped down heavily like what happened to Altered Beast, or they'll just be a different game entirely like with Dragon's Lair. Virgin Interactive's 1992 port of the 1989 Apple II classic Prince of Persia is so visually remarkable that it captured the essence of the original basically as well as it could. Prince of Persia was famous for its animation in that it was one of the first games where your character actually moved like a human being instead of just a collection of pixels sliding around, and this was a technical achievement on the Apple II, so the fact that the animation has translated to the NES is just so impressive, even if it isn't perfect. As well as the animations, the levels look above average too, with some convincing depth and smooth screen scrolling. Unfortunately, the port is riddled with weird control issues and minor changes which make it pretty bad to play, but its graphical fidelity can't be denied. The 3D Battles of World Runner is an attempt at making a pseudo 3D game, and the effect is really well done. Made by Square in 1987, this is one of the more popular games on this list, and it uses similar techniques to a lot of 80s racing games like Outrun and Pole Position, with stuff like the endlessly scrolling pattern on the ground, the side-to-side scrolling backgrounds, and sprites which get bigger and more detailed as they come closer. It's good smooth stuff for the NES, and it has some cool Space Harrier rip-off boss battles too. Also, if you press select, the game has a 3D mode where you need those 80s red and blue glasses to see it, which is just so 80s, and I don't have a pair at hand, but it's a really neat thing to include. The 3D Battles of World Runner is fun, simple, and impressive, so what more can you really ask for? Like Prince of Persia, The Immortal from 1991 is a port, but this is a port of the 1990 Apple II GS game made by Will Harvey. Though other versions are much more detailed and violent, the NES port is super interesting in its own right, just simply for doing this sort of graphic style really well. Being an isometric dungeon crawling romp, this game scrolls around and animates really nicely despite its limited frame rate, and it features some great sprite work and a convincing perspective. It's rare to see something like this on the NES, and the fact that it's so well done makes it well worth a mention. This final game is Summer Carnival 92 Rekka, a Japanese exclusive shoot-'em-up which came out late in the Famicom's life in, you guessed it, 1992. This game is well known for two reasons, one being that it's extremely difficult, so difficult that even shmup fans think it's difficult, and those guys can put up with anything. The second reason is that it really pushed the Famicom hardware. It moves super quick and has an incredibly high sprite count. Sprites just fly around the screen so insanely fast for a Famicom game, it's really a sight to behold. It's quite a colourful game too, and some of the later levels that I couldn't get to have some really interesting wavy sort of effects, which is well worth a Google. The effect sprites, like the explosions, run at 30 frames instead of 60 because of hardware limitations, and though this isn't a graphical thing, the soundtrack and audio tech this game uses is super advanced for the system, using 8-bit sampled loops across 4 channels. Rekka is way too hard for me to enjoy as a game, but as a technical achievement, it's fantastic. And that's the 5. If you like video games, and you like shoes, you should check out today's sponsor, Viceroy Kicks. You can do all sorts of things in their shoes. You can walk outside in the dark, you can bust sweet power slides, and perhaps most importantly, you can play new and old video games in them. For real though, these are my pair, and I'm super impressed with the quality, and you should go check out their designs and the Kickstarter in the link in the description. I always find it interesting going back and playing the less iconic games that came out well before I was born. Like, I know I've talked about this before, but it just rings so true here. Like, it's that sort of phenomenon where you can experience deja vu without actually being familiar with something. Like, it's like I'm playing someone else's childhood, and that's just a weird kind of, like, for lack of a better word, nostalgic sort of feeling. Like, I think back to when I was a kid with a PS2, and I wasn't always playing the games that the PS2 was remembered for. Like, I wasn't playing God of War or Shadow of the Colossus. Like, Instead, I was playing games like Crisis Zone and Alien Hominid and 007 Nightfire, and I always find those sort of B-tier games to represent more so what it was like owning one of these systems at the time, and that's how I felt playing these NES games. I don't know, that's just a thought I keep having. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Check out links to stuff in the description. Hope you're well. Have a good one. See ya.